Biden has the U.S. re-engaging with the UN Human Rights Council. The UN welcomes the U.S. with open arms. But will re-engagement lead us to the right track? Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. Engage with us by subscribing to this channel and clicking the notification bell so you can be the first to watch our new episodes, engaging episodes, every week. If you unsubscribed to us in the past, consider re-engaging with us. Trust us, we'll definitely do our part to hold up our end of the bargain. Speaking of engagement, diplomacy is back, baby.
America is back. Diplomacy is back at the center of our foreign policy.
In a State Department press release on February 8th, Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced that the President has instructed the Department of State to re-engage immediately and robustly with the UN Human Rights Council. Now, for those of you who lived quarantined from world events over the past 3 years, back in 2018, the U.S. was like, nope, and just quit the UN Human Rights Council. Trump's UN ambassador, Nikki Haley, had accused the council of failing to hold real human rights abusers accountable, and also of having a bias against Israel. But, as Slow-Mo Biden tells us,
diplomacy is back.
It's no surprise that the UN Secretary General welcomes the decision of the U.S. to re-engage with the Human Rights Council. You see, the Council's mechanisms and special procedures are vital tools for ensuring action and accountability. Obama's former ambassador to the UN Human Rights Council said there is no doubt that the Human Rights Council will serve as a venue for rebuilding relationships and reestablishing its leadership in the world. And this dashing young man on some other channel said, the United Nations, I have every confidence in you. Sorry, that was like 7 years ago. And a lot has changed since then. Here's one from last year. Speaking of human rights, a whistleblower has accused the UN Human Rights Office of helping China keep an eye on dissidents. But don't worry, we've got our priorities straight. Well, China has its priorities straight. I'm sure the Chinese Communist Party's focus on Australia's human rights record has nothing to do with the fact that they're currently waging a trade war on Australia to get it to back down on calling for an independent investigation into the coronavirus outbreak. Okay, even outside of China's revenge tactics, there have always been issues with addressing human rights at the UN. In fact, the UN Human Rights Council was set up in 2006 to replace the previous UN Commission on Human Rights. That's because the UN Commission on Human Rights faced widespread criticism for letting countries with poor human rights records become members. And looking at the Commission's membership list from 2006, there are a lot of countries with poor human rights records, like Venezuela, Russia, Eritrea, Cuba, China, and of course, Canada. But don't worry, the new UN Human Rights Council fixed that problem. Because now, with membership on the Council comes a responsibility to uphold high human rights standards. This is a criteria insisted on by states themselves when they adopted the resolution in 2006 to create the Human Rights Council. Okay, so now only countries that uphold high human rights standards will be on the Human Rights Council. Sounds great. Countries like Venezuela, Russia, Eritrea, Cuba, and China. At least they got rid of Canada. Okay. So the UN Human Rights Council isn't exactly perfect. But hey, even Antony Blinken acknowledges that. He says that the U.S. government recognizes that the Human Rights Council is a flawed body, in need of reform to its agenda, membership, and focus, including its disproportionate focus on Israel. There, Israel. Just wait a little longer. I'm sure President Biden will call you eventually. He's probably just still all talked out from his 2-hour-long call to Chinese leader Xi Jinping. But while Secretary of State Blinken acknowledged problems with the Human Rights Council, his bigger point was that our withdrawal in June 2018 did nothing to encourage meaningful change, but instead created a vacuum of U.S. leadership, which countries with authoritarian agendas have used to their advantage, and that to address the Council's deficiencies and ensure it lives up to its mandate, the United States must be at the table using the full weight of our diplomatic leadership. Leadership as a non-voting observer, by the way. So basically, the Biden administration is treating the Human Rights Council like the high school cool kids table. Their argument is that the U.S. needs to have a seat at the table, even if they're just a hanger-on for now. But don't worry. Although the U.S. will have only non-voting observer status on the Council through the end of 2021, the officials said the administration intends to seek one of 3 full member seats currently held by Austria, Denmark, and Italy from the Western Europe and other states group that come up for election later this year. Yes, soon the U.S. will be wearing pink on Wednesdays. The left-leaning think tank, the Center for American Progress, is also in favor of engagement with the UN. It says U.S. withdrawal from the Council is a largely self-defeating move, as U.S. absence allows for some of the leading rights-abusing countries to undermine the Council even further from within. They also say that boycotting sends a clear message that the United States is interested in advancing human rights only to the extent that it does not involve criticism of its own practices or those of some of its allies, which significantly diminishes the credibility and efficacy of U.S. human rights advocacy writ large. Look, guys, engagement is always good. As the World Economic Forum said, as a bilateral strategy, engagement has proved to be astonishingly successful, having led to historic openings in places like Myanmar. That was in 2015. And things are still fine in Myanmar, right? Okay, maybe Myanmar's not the best example. Now, there are a lot of people who are in favor of engagement, despite the hiccups that happen within organizations like the UN Human Rights Council. But there are other people who think that those hiccups are too big to tolerate. And I'll get to that after the break. Welcome back. Former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, is one of those people who thinks the UN Human Rights Council can't be reformed by rejoining. She was involved in the U.S. pullout back in 2018. She recently tweeted that the UN Human Rights Council doesn't improve human rights. It covers for dictators and human rights abusers like Russia, China, and Venezuela. Sad to see the Biden admin legitimize an org that has become a farce to human rights advocates around the world. Nikki Haley said the U.S. spent a whole year trying to negotiate with 193 countries on changing and reforming the Human Rights Council.
If the United States gets back on it, you are giving credibility to a farce of a council that does nothing but hide human rights. If we are the country that has always fought for human rights, get these criminals off the Human Rights Council. Don't join them and sit with them on a panel and discuss human rights. It's really embarrassing to do that.
Many conservative experts agree with Haley. The Heritage Foundation wrote a report saying the Human Rights Council must first reform to earn U.S. re-engagement. They say rejoining the HRC before reforms are adopted will only demonstrate to other governments that they can gain the legitimacy of U.S. membership without reform. So instead of treating the UN Human Rights Council like the cool kids table, the Heritage Foundation is saying that the U.S. is the cool kid. And we can't just let the Human Rights Council decide to make fetch happen, or something. But the Heritage Foundation argues the Human Rights Council proved unwilling to confront China, Cuba, and other influential countries for their blatant human rights atrocities, not for lack of American criticisms or efforts to reform it, but because most countries prefer the status quo. which is what happens when many of the countries on the Human Rights Council would prefer the Council not look into their own human rights. Like China, where they put Uyghurs in concentration camps and harvest their organs. The UN Human Rights Council hasn't had time to investigate China yet, but they have had time to investigate Israeli settlements in occupied Palestinian territory. So the conservative argument is the UN Human Rights Council must improve first to be worthy of America's presence. I guess the real question is whether America is Lindsay Lohan or Regina George. So what do you think about the U.S. re-engaging with the Human Rights Council? Do you think re-engagement will work out in the end? How exactly can the UN Human Rights Council make genuine progress through U.S. involvement? Leave your comments below. And remember, America Uncovered is supported mainly by viewers. So visit patreon.com/AmericaUncovered. Contribute $1 or more per episode. We rely on your support to help us keep making great episodes. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.